All right, finally, we get to the good stuff. So Castree Benyo is our presenter for tonight, and she is already sharing her screen. This will stop. Let's see. Oh,
Yep, let me know if everything looks okay.
well, I bumped the button and now it's back to my screen, but I'll.
Okay.
So a little bit by introduction, Katie is a senior director at Accumen. Accumen's lab performance analytics technology, they utilize benchmarks and actual insights to provide guidance that drives lab efficiencies and monitors outcomes. I'm not going to read all this to you. You can all read just as well as I. But I did want to paraphrase that her work and thought leadership have been published in Value in Health. She's been an ASQ speaker and a presenter at several regional and national conferences. And she is a member of ASQ and joins us from the St. Louis, Missouri section. So tonight's presentation is on labor optimization, or in other words, how do you turn those soft savings into hard dollars that you can measure, quantify, and determine whether your project improvement plan was a success or not. And labor optimization, her key point, Katie's key point, is that does not mean labor reduction. So with that, I will now turn it over to Katie. I'm going to stop sharing, and there we have it. All right. Well, thank you, Katie.
All right. Well, let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction. I will elaborate a little bit on what you shared, and those who were in the Meet the Speaker session heard this already. But my educational background, I have a bachelor's in community health from the University of Illinois and a Master of Health Administration from St. Louis University. After getting my master's degree, I spent about 4 years at Hospital Sisters Health System, or HSHS, in Illinois, most recently as the Senior Performance Improvement Specialist for their medical group. And while I was there, I got my Six Sigma Black Belt certification through ASQ. I also became a Team Steps Master Trainer through AHRQ. And I am now at Accumen. This is my 7th year with the company. I started out as an operations manager in our lab excellence service line, then moved on to senior director. About that time, I also got a certificate in lab quality management systems from CLSI. And currently, I'm actually a client account lead. So a little update to the intro that was shared. As a client account lead, I oversee not only our lab excellence service line, but the other service lines that we offer: supply chain management, patient blood management, lab stewardship, and some of the data and technology offerings that we have. I'll give you a little bit of an overview of Accumen as well. I'll start by reading you our positioning statement. It's a little bit wordy, but for U.S. hospitals and healthcare systems who need assistance addressing complex strategies, opportunities, and challenges related to laboratory, clinical, and imaging, we are the leading technology-enabled services company focused primarily on clinical ancillary care. So those 3 areas of focus, laboratory, imaging, and clinical, they each have their own technology solutions. And you can see a bit more detail on the slide here, all available on our website. I'll just share a few comments to say that we've seen a lot of changes across our laboratory clients, especially throughout the pandemic and thereafter. We're still somewhat in the midst of that. I think a lot of healthcare systems learned just how strong and adaptable they are. They were forced to make decisions and changes very quickly. Things that would normally take significant time to implement got done out of necessity. And I also think the healthcare industry and other industries are finally recognizing the medical lab professionals who play such a vital role in healthcare. So I just want to take a moment to thank them for their dedication to patient care. And we may even have a couple laboratorians on the phone with us today. I will review the learning objectives for this session. One, we want to understand why it's important to capitalize on the time and labor savings of a process improvement. This is really as a result of not only the significant cost pressures that are on organizations' expenses, but there is also a current and future shortage of qualified personnel, especially in the laboratory industry, and we'll talk quite a bit about that. Secondly, we want to define labor optimization, which is a long-term strategy to right-size your labor pool to the amount of work needed to support your business. And then lastly, we'll identify and describe 4 key components to successful labor optimization, which are number 1, of course, continuous improvement, but also establishing labor oversight, data analytics, and countermetrics. So to jump right into the content, most of you as Lean Six Sigma practitioners probably know that improvement projects can have significant financial savings. And some have even said that Six Sigma is primarily about profitability and that the improved quality and efficiency are just immediate byproducts of that. Financial benefit or risk is a factor that's frequently used to evaluate, prioritize, and select Six Sigma projects. And cost benefit analysis is often done to determine if a project is worthwhile. Now, this is normally done before implementing the project plans, based on estimates of cost and predicted value of the benefits. And it's kind of used as a management tool to determine if approval should be given for a project. And then sometimes, I say sometimes, we actually take real data and then analyze that from an accounting perspective after the project is completed in order to quantify the financial impact of the project. Now, many Six Sigma projects do legitimately have financial savings that are well worth the efforts of the initiative. A great example from the manufacturing world would be scrap reduction. If you develop some training materials and conduct employee training to change over your process to an improved process for production, those might be really minor costs in comparison to the benefits of reducing scrap. In fact, there might only be a payback period of a matter of months, and many organizations have a maximum payback period criteria of just 1 year. On the other hand, there's really a tendency in lean-focused performance improvement programs, particularly those in the service industries and healthcare especially, to concentrate on projects where the primary benefit is reducing unnecessary tasks and thereby reducing cycle time of steps and then overall lead time of processes. And those time savings are frequently converted to dollars in what we would refer to as soft or light green savings, as opposed to hard or dark green savings from something like reducing wasted supplies or materials. So for example, let's say I picked some really easy numbers for us. Current state, let's say that your process has 5 steps, each with a cycle time of 12 minutes, totaling a lead time of 60 minutes. And let's say that process is done 8 times per day, 5 days per week, for a total of 40 hours a week. So let's say your improvement team identifies that one of those process steps can be eliminated, so we reduce 12 minutes there. Maybe another one can be streamlined in some way, so we reduce 8 minutes there. And after implementing those changes, the new process lead time has decreased from 60 minutes to 40 minutes, or a 33% improvement. The total of 40 hours per week has decreased to 26 hours and 40 minutes per week, or a savings of 0.3 full-time equivalents, or FTEs. If the average hourly wage of the person completing this process is $27 an hour, plus about 20% for benefits, giving us $32.40, then the soft or light green financial savings of this change might be calculated as $32.40 per hour times the 13.3 hours per week, and we have $432 per week in savings. I can't see many of you, but if we were in the room together, I would ask how many of you have done calculations like this at your organizations? Probably many of you. At previous organizations, we did this for just about every project that we had. And this is certainly not a criticism of this method, but I think we can do a little bit more. Because in reality, labor expenses haven't decreased. And if there's a finite amount of work to be done or service to be provided, then revenue hasn't increased. And while there might be some other intangible benefits from this change, increased satisfaction for the employee, reduced turnaround time for the service to be provided to the customer, executive leadership might still be satisfied with these results. And especially for myself, in moving from working internally at an organization to being a third-party consultant, which is under much more scrutiny, executive leadership would like to see more than that. And so what's missing? How can we fully take advantage of the improvement's benefits and move from those soft or light green savings to the hard or dark green dollars? Well, the answer is labor optimization, and it does not entail a reduction in force or a RIF. And so next we're going to cover what labor optimization is, what it is not, and as I said, those 4 key components for success. Before we get into that, first of all, you might be asking, well, why is this important? Why do we even need to capitalize on the time or labor savings of a process improvement? That increased satisfaction for employees, reduced turnaround time for customers, why isn't that enough? Well, those things are important, but long-term benefits like employee retention and customer loyalty are really hard to tie back to a single process improvement that you've implemented. Moreover, there's a really urgent need today for labor optimization. Now, my perspective comes from the healthcare laboratory industry. And one, there's significant cost pressure on hospital expenses today. Because of changes in laboratory and healthcare as a whole, leadership is rethinking how the traditional lab is structured in order to try to remain competitive in a changing environment. And 2, there's a current and future shortage of qualified lab techs. And so with techs being harder to find, labs have to rethink how to function operationally in new ways, more efficiently, more cost effectively, and with optimized skill mix and workflows. Now, before I discuss that shortage a little bit more, I want to share one of my favorite quotes with you. And if you've heard me present in the past, then you've heard this, but I think it's really relevant. It's from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it says, "As to methods, there may be a million and then some, but principles are few. The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods, ignoring principles, is sure to have trouble." So you're going to see some methods today that are maybe really specific to the laboratory industry. But what I hope you can get from that is the principles behind it and think about how those might apply to your industry or organization, because a lot of the trends that we'll discuss are common across industries. So getting into that shortage of qualified lab techs, according to the BLS, or the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were an estimated about 335,000 medical and clinical laboratory technologists and technicians employed in the US in 2016. And the BLS projected a nationwide need for a 13% average increase in medical lab technologists and technicians between 2016 and 2026. Now, maybe that number doesn't mean a whole lot to you. When I first read that, it did not. 13%. I don't know, is that good? Is that bad? Well, that's nearly double the underlying average increase in all occupations, which is 7%. So maybe that gives you a better idea of what that number might mean. Another data source, the US Department of Health and Human Services, projected an even more substantial increase of 22% in demand or growth for lab techs between 2012 and 2025. In addition to this projected demand for additional lab professionals, lab managers are continuing to report high vacancy rates. The average vacancy rate across the nation in the 2016 and 17 ASCP vacancy survey was over 7%. And I think that number has only increased during the pandemic. Anecdotally, I can tell you, I have clients who have over 40 med tech positions open across their systems. The VA Office of Inspector General also determined regarding staffing shortages among Veterans Health Administration occupations that the med tech job code ranked as one of the largest critical need occupations.
Quick question.
Yeah.
How do those numbers compare with the ability to train those people in a year?
To become a lab tech, you have to have a bachelor's degree and a certain number of hours of coursework. And then the training is about 1 year. That includes both didactic lectures and clinical rotations through laboratory sections.
And how many do the schools usually turn out in a year?
That's a great question. And I did not prompt this person to ask, but we're actually going to cover that in a couple slides.
I'll expect my check in the mail.
Thanks. All right, so with those projected increases in the need for medical lab professionals and the current high vacancy rates, the profession is really suffering from a workforce shortage that I would say is approaching crisis levels. The reasons for the clinical lab workforce shortage are primarily these three. One, the retirement of the aging workforce. Two, the increase in demand for lab services. And three, the fact that vacancy rates exceed the number of MLS and MLT graduates. So in point number 3 there, we'll answer the question that was asked. Let's walk through each of those in a little bit more detail. So number 1, retirement of the aging workforce. And again, think about how this might impact your organization or industry. This is not something that's unique to laboratory, but clinical labs are feeling the impact of this. There are a lot of experienced professionals who delayed retirement because of economic uncertainties. And so they're now retiring or planning to retire in the next 5 years in really high numbers. That ASCP vacancy survey that I mentioned on a previous slide, the average expected 5-year overall retirement rate was over 19%, almost 20%. So think about that. Within the next 5 years, imagine about 20% of your workforce retiring. Now, those retirements also impact the educational programs themselves. There was a survey done of program directors for clinical lab science education, and over 41% of respondents said that they would be retiring in the next 5 years. And you can see the percentages listed there for other faculty retirement rates, slightly less, but still some significant numbers. Number 2, the increase in demand for lab services. This is really due to 3 reasons: an increase in acute visits, an increase in the population who's over age 65, and then expansion in molecular testing. So expanded Medicaid coverage combined with the increase in primary care visits because of population growth have caused an increase in acute, chronic, and preventive primary care visits, all areas that frequently have lab tests and lab testing along with them. There's been a rapid and significant increase in the population over 65 years of age. That's projected over 18 million by 2025, just a few short years away. That will also increase the demand for services, including an increase in chronic disease management. And then lastly, with this shift toward personalized medicine and more interest in genomics, the market for molecular and other esoteric testing continues to grow. Now, one way to kind of measure that growth would be looking at the NCBI's genetic testing registry. It lists more than 54,000 genetic tests related to over 11,000 conditions. And those numbers have risen by 300% and 200% respectively over the past 5 years. And then number 3, the fact that vacancy rates exceed the number of graduates. US institutions are getting more efficient in training medical lab scientists and technicians, and there has been some increase in the number of graduates, but the enrollment and graduation of medical lab professionals is not keeping up with the rapidly rising demand. There are also constant threats of closure for these MLS and MLT programs because of the high costs associated with operating them. In 2000, there were 263 MLS programs and 248 MLT programs. In 2017, there were 234 MLS programs and 244 MLT programs. So this is a decrease of about 7% in the total accredited programs from 2000. And the programs are not certifying the volume of MLS and MLT who are needed to meet the demand for lab professionals currently or in the future. Between the increased demand for services and therefore the increased demand for lab professionals and the lab professionals who are needed to replace those who are exiting the workforce, there's a total demand that exceeds the current educational output by more than double. So to say that another way, the profession is only educating less than half of the number of lab professionals who are needed. Now, it appears that this lab workforce shortage will be present for the foreseeable future unless the profession moves to improve these outcomes. Vacancy rates are definitely reflecting those difficulties in recruiting new professionals. And we see our clients with all kinds of efforts to try to improve recruitment, signing bonuses, loan forgiveness, tuition reimbursement, other incentives. These are really not permanent solutions. And especially with potential reductions in lab reimbursement, they also might not be fiscally feasible for the long term. Now, the urgent need for labor optimization is relevant for other industries too. There is significant cost pressure on many organizations' expenses today. And in some cases, there might be a similar shortage of qualified workers. The retirement of the aging workforce certainly affects almost all industries. And the impact of this will be heightened if your organization is also seeing an increase in demand for services, or if you'd simply like to grow your volume of business. And while the vacancy rates for the professionals that you are trying to recruit might not be exceeding the number of graduates from that field, the recent COVID-19 pandemic has created an even higher demand for jobs. Businesses have ramped back up, but struggled to hire workers. And the economic data on this are pretty clear. Employers are getting very desperate for workers. As of April 2021, job openings had risen to an unprecedented 9.3 million, according to the BLS. And while that actual number might be surprising, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the difficulties in finding enough workers. As the country has reopened and more people have been vaccinated, people didn't quickly return to work quite the way that a lot of economists predicted that they would. And so this has in turn begun to impact customers. Think of the really simple example of a restaurant. If they have limited menus or reduced dining room capacity because of low staffing, that impacts the consumer, the customer. In an attempt to combat the worker shortage, some states reduced unemployment benefits, indicating that reducing unemployment benefits would make unemployed individuals more willing to go back to work. And without getting into any kind of a political conversation, the data on this show that giving unemployed individuals less money did not fix the worker shortage. The data show that that effect was very minimal. And in addition to the 9.3 million job openings, other economic indicators also strongly support this idea that there are not enough workers in the US. For example, the number of people voluntarily leaving their jobs rose by 164,000 to 942,000 in June of last year. So with all those numbers, suffice it to say that all industries can probably benefit from labor optimization. So what is it? Let's go back to that example project where we've eliminated and streamlined tasks, we've reduced the overall process lead time. How do you save that $432 a week in actual labor expense? Well, if you reduce one person's FTE status from a 1.0 to a 0.67, not only is that somewhat impractical regarding scheduling and the hours of the business, but it's also kind of devaluing to workers, and it's certainly not going to encourage anyone to participate in process improvement going forward. And given all of these worker shortages that I've mentioned, we also don't want to lose any good employee. So how then do you minimize labor? Well, labor optimization is a long-term initiative to right-size your labor pool to the amount of work needed to support the business. As your organization pursues continuous improvement, whether that's through Lean, Six Sigma, any other methodology, successful projects typically reduce the workload. The labor pool can then shrink over time, while maintaining or even increasing quality and service standards. Now, if your organization is seeing an increase in the volume of service provided, or if you'd like to pursue one, then right sizing might look like maintaining the current labor pool while growing the business. And if volumes or business are stagnant, then right sizing can be achieved through attrition over time as folks retire. Again, not a reduction in force. So there are really 4 key components to successful labor optimization: continuous improvement, establishing labor oversight, data analytics, and countermetrics. We'll talk through each of these. Number 1, of course, being continuous improvement, something that all of you on the phone are probably very familiar with, but in case not, I'll give a very high-level overview. Kaizen is Japanese for continuous improvement, and that word is taken from the Japanese kai for change and zen for good. It's also referred to as incremental improvement, but on a continual basis. The improvement of processes is key to successful results, and it should involve everyone. Typical continuous improvement might include PDCA or PDSA cycles, larger domain framework structured projects, or Kaizen events or Kaizen blitz activities. But regardless of what activity you use or what structure, some of the key elements are the use of data to solve problems and a heavy focus on customers, both internal and external to the process. So successful continuous improvement in many cases reduces workload. Number 2 then is establishing labor oversight. Labor oversight is an established structure and cadence to review productivity metrics and progress to goals, discuss variances, and initiate counteractions. Ideally, this would start with drafting a charter, including a mission statement to successfully achieve the set goals, developing a workflow for how you approve or deny new or replacement FTEs. And so you need to make sure the appropriate decision makers are included. You might also include some specifications about decision making, things like majority vote of members or a quorum requirement for any recommendation to be considered. But this governance or committee is a really essential component of productivity improvement. And I love the way that we typically word this last sentence in our charters, to ensure that improvements in efficiency are realized, as well as delivered with care, discipline, and accountability. This is an example charter for a labor oversight committee. I won't read this to you, but you can see that it includes the purpose of the committee, the roles on the committee, members. Typically for us, that would include people both internal to the healthcare system as well as from our Accumen team. And I'm happy to share this charter template if anyone would like it. Next is data analytics. So that workflow that I mentioned about approving or denying new or replacement FTEs, that should really include access to and meaningful analysis of productivity data. Now that rec process or form that you use could even require that the submitter assess the current productivity against targets before submitting anything. What might some of those valuable metrics be? Typically, we include volumes, meaning units of service provided, in our case, number of lab tests performed and billed, labor in terms of hours and FTEs, and then the productivity calculation of those two, tests per hour or hours per test, labor cost in terms of dollars, and then the calculation of labor cost per test. These are just screenshots of a few of the analytics dashboards that we create in what's called our Accumen Performance Suite. At the top are volumes. On the left are lab orders and results from the lab information system. On the right is, the top right is volumes in terms of billable CPTs. In the middle, we're looking at labor. On the left in terms of expenses or dollars, and on the right in terms of FTEs or hours. And then the bottom right is kind of the fraction calculation of those two, productivity dashboards, which we have several of. This one shows trends over time. We're looking at monthly CPTs versus labor. Typically, we look at that in terms of productive hours per test or test per hour. And then the bottom left is something that we call schedule excellence, where based on the lab orders and results out of the lab information system, we see how that lab testing volume goes up and down throughout the 24 hours of the day. And then we compare that to the number of staff that you have at the bench throughout the hours of the day, over 24 hours. And those two shapes should align for the most part. If they don't, you've probably got people who are overworked and people who are underworked at other hours of the day. We want to try to balance that workload across people and across shifts between benches as well. The next picture I have in here, this is just an example of the workflow that you could follow for your labor oversight committee. This might be kind of hard for you guys to read, but basically the manager would identify a need for a new or replacement FTE. And in submitting a rec to their director, they would have to include all of that supporting data and documentation. The director would review that, collaborate with them as necessary, and this either meets the criteria to move forward or it does not. They might need some additional supporting documentation. The subcommittee would then review that. They may or may not approve it, and then on down the line to your VP, who would actually submit that out to recruiting to try to fill the position. But again, the key thing here is bring data if you're going to ask for more staff, because we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of our dollars and that we're hiring people only when we truly need them. And the reality is it's very challenging to hire people today. So this is not a process because we don't want to employ good people or create jobs, but the fact is they're just not out there to be had in many cases. And so you have responsibly if you want to be successful. Marking. But they could also just be a percentage improvement over time or a comparison to either yourself or someone else in your healthcare system rather than a benchmark. And then the last of four components here, in conjunction with labor oversight and productivity data analytics, counter metrics focused on quality and service should also be an area of focus. So you can establish a similar committee. Oversight, it's a structure and cadence to review the quality and service metrics and progress to goals. It would have those same components, a charter, a mission statement, data analysis of those metrics. And again, these goals as well could be established either based on benchmarking for quality and service or just on self-improvement over time. But overall, it's really important to make sure that in reducing our lead time, we don't negatively impact quality, and in minimizing labor, we don't negatively impact service. So in summary, establishing these components will make it more likely that organizations can capitalize on the time and labor savings of their process improvement initiatives. Going back to our original example, if you continue on and do additional process improvement initiatives, if those are completed and sustained, then your time savings will eventually total one or multiple FTEs. And so then long-term, labor optimization would right-size the labor pool to the new amount of work that's needed to support the business. Because these successful initiatives have reduced the workload, the labor pool can shrink over time, still make sure that we are maintaining or even increasing quality and service standards. If your organization is experiencing an increase in the volume of service that's provided, then this right sizing might just look like maintaining the current labor pool while growing the business, or at least increasing labor at a slower rate than your increasing volumes. And if your volumes are stagnant, then right sizing can be achieved through attrition as people retire or move on and do not need to be replaced. So this really brings those calculated soft or light green savings to fruition as true hard dark green dollars that actually impact the organization's bottom line. Here is a quick review of the 3 learning objectives. I won't read those to you again, but hopefully you feel like we've covered each of these. And before we wrap up, I also want to share some additional reading. This is a white paper that Accumen put out, actually, I think back in around 2015, but it's still pretty relevant. It's called Why Lab, Why Now? The Unclaimed Opportunity for Better Patient Care. And if anyone's interested in learning more about laboratory, I always recommend this one to be read, because what it talks about is traditionally many healthcare systems across the country have not seen the lab as a vital strategic asset, or those who do tend to focus on outpatient labs as a source of revenue. And frankly, this is why our company exists, because laboratory hasn't been an area of focus. While it's true that lab spend is low in comparison to the spend of many other hospital departments, a really large portion of that lab spend has the opportunity for cost reduction. And then aside from the financial opportunity, the laboratory also has a huge impact on patient care. There's a statistic out there that says that laboratory services leverage 60 to 70% of all critical decision-making in healthcare, meaning things like admittance, discharge, medication, treatment. So the lab really has a direct impact, not only on the quality of service that physicians and other healthcare providers receive, but ultimately the quality of patient care that they deliver. And so with all of the challenges that are facing healthcare systems today, now is really the time to claim the opportunity to focus on laboratories, because they can provide both that cost reduction opportunity as well as the quality improvement leading to better patient care. So I highly recommend checking that out. If you just Google our name and the name of the paper, you should be able to find it pretty easily. And then lastly, I'll just share my contact information here. I would love to keep in touch with anyone who's on the meeting today. If you have feedback on the presentation, let me know. If you have additional questions that you don't get a chance to ask today, or if you simply want to connect on LinkedIn and keep each other posted on what we're working on, that is always welcome. So I appreciate the time and your attention thus far. If there are any questions from the group, I'd be happy to open it up and answer those.
Great. Well, thank you, Katie. Very, very excellent presentation. Appreciate hearing some of the details and formulae that you use to help quantify the labor productivity, labor optimization. Does anybody out in the universe have any questions for Katie?
I just checked the chat and I don't see any there. So if anybody wants to unmute, feel free, or if you want to type them in, I've got that chat open now and can look at those.
One thing that didn't jump out was that if you're able to improve processes and free up FTEs, those are journeyman FTEs that you can redeploy and don't have to do the cost and problem of hiring new people.
Absolutely, yeah. If you have another, bench or another location even that needs someone, move them from one to the other. That's so much cheaper than hiring and doing training and onboarding, definitely.
That might be where the real dark green is in that.
Any other questions?
Anybody else have any questions for Katie? I guess not. Okay. Well, Katie, again, I want to thank you for your time and your presentation. And we will be placing the recording up on our website probably in 2 or 3 days or so. But again, thank you for attending, and we appreciate everything you're doing for the society in your efforts with ASQ as well. All right. Well, moving on to wrap up for this evening. Well, there is a chat comment and a couple thank yous. Okay. All right. Just a reminder that all of tonight's attendees will soon receive an email link from our Voice of Customer Chair, Daniel Marsh. That email will contain a link to take the event satisfaction survey, give us any suggestions for improvements or new topics, maybe you've heard a speaker that really piqued your interest and you'd like to make that individual's name and contact information available to the section to consider in the future program. Any information we can get from you to help us keep this section growing and the interest in our program meetings are greatly appreciated. That email will also contain then our use certificate for this evening. Future programs coming up. Again, because of the shuffle we had, October was open, so our program chair, Vic Nanda, has been able to bring Karen Holting in to talk to us, and she is coming to us from Medtronic. Not quite sure. Oh, I do have the title. Vic, if you're on the call, if you want to unmute, if you want to just give a few highlights, what you know about Karen Holting and her topics for next month. Is Vic still out there? Yeah, he is. Vic, do you have any comments? Maybe he's not currently on the call. So Karen is the speaker for next month, and an announcement will be coming out both in the website and the sundial that we are resuming our face-to-face program meetings. Rather than the Edward Jones Training Center down in Tempe, we will be using the Grifols Training Academy. They're in Glendale on the corner of 53rd Avenue and Camelback Road. We will continue to offer Zoom for the virtual component. So for those of you that choose not to or just find it prohibitive to attend the meeting in person, we will still keep that option for you. And because this will be our first time back getting together in 2 years, we really have no idea of how many people might be taking advantage of this opportunity. We highly encourage all of you to attend if you can. You can put up with the traffic and other headaches to commute in, but bring your own meal, and we will reimburse you up your cost of the meal up to $15. We'll have a gift card for you. So bring your own meal, whether it's from the local fast food shop or a sub sandwich, or you bring something from home. Bring your own meal, bring your own drink, your cocktail, and we will reimburse you for that. So whole purpose of getting back together really is to encourage this face-to-face networking. We feel, we've done our best virtually, but nothing beats an in-person meeting. You can look people in the eye and shake their hands, and we really want to do that if at all possible. So I look forward to that meeting, October 13th. November 10th, our scheduled speaker is Roger Ritterbeck. He will be talking to us about changes that are happening right now to the aerospace standard. So AS 9100 and 9104, I think, is the exact number of that standard. So he will be discussing those changes. I know we have a significant number of section members who are involved in aerospace and defense industry. So that will be of particular concern to them. Again, we also hope to be at the Grifols Training Center again in November. And also in December, we're looking at having a holiday networking event. Like past holiday networking events, we're not really sure we're going to have a guest speaker. We do have one tentatively assigned. Stephen Bonacorsi will be talking to us. So how do you deliver results that really stick, such that you're not resolving the same problem every couple of years? So he's going to be offering some insights and examples. We may have him at this holiday event, or we may push them out to 2023, because our traditional holiday networking event is really more of an unmeeting. There's no set agenda. You just show up, enjoy good food and refreshments, and just participate in the holiday spirit. And again, network with your peers, colleagues, and other section experts. So that's the schedule for the remainder of the year. Vic is busy putting the program together for next year as we speak. We do measure our performance at each and every meeting. Two key metrics are overall satisfaction. So over the last course of 3 years, we've moved the needle from an overall average of like 82% to 83%, 84%. And in August, we were at 84. And then we also measure your estimate of the effectiveness, your overall satisfaction with the networking portion of the agenda. And we moved that up considerably from when we started, excuse me, when COVID first hit, and we first had to use a virtual type format. Our networking satisfaction scores were in the high 30s, low 40s, and we've been slowly inching that up into the mid to upper 70s. I think 1 month we actually had an 86%. So again, your feedback on these surveys is key to helping us deliver more content and more opportunities to network to help us improve your member experience. Just a quick reminder of all the different platforms where you can connect with us. And a special call out, we are looking for someone. We're thinking of the younger generation specifically. That seems to be who really follows Instagram. You got to be able to put up videos and quite frequently. And quite frankly, I am trying to manage all this myself, plus serve as the section chair and populate my ASQ. And fortunately, I'm retired, but I have other things in the other irons in the fire as well. I would like to divvy this assignment up a little bit. So again, if you're interested in getting involved with the section, this would be a great opportunity. Take small baby steps, participate, contribute on any one of these platforms. And again, especially for Instagram, if we can find somebody who's comfortable using Instagram and they're also experienced or wish to become more experienced in the quality arena, we'd like to build somebody as a quality influencer for the Phoenix section. So that would require someone who knows how to use Instagram and has the time and creativity to create a number of these. What are they? No more than 3-minute videos up on Instagram. I think the shorter the better, actually, but that would be a great opportunity for you. So before we close, we always try to get your final thoughts and comments. We review the chat. I also created a poll. Let me bring that up. A wrap-up poll. So I'm going to launch it here. Hopefully you now can see the poll. It's just this one question. How satisfied are you with tonight's program? Considering the entire agenda, networking, the introductions, the speaker's presentation, the materials, etc. You could indicate your score. Again, this will be covered in the bigger survey link too, but you can give us that score tonight. We can just share with everybody how we're doing in an effort to be as transparent as possible. So, and there is a second question. How can we add value to the networking portion? So those would be the two questions I would like to see answered as far as what you liked or didn't like about networking and your level of satisfaction overall. So that would be fantastic. And then again, thank you everybody for your participation this evening. Looking forward to meeting a number of you face-to-face next month at our program meeting in Glendale. Let's see. Someone mentioned that Joanne is missed at the CTS. Jennifer mentioned Joanne is missed. And let's see, I have a comment. Even Glendale is a little far for a given person, so she'll probably still continue to Zoom, and we welcome that. Any interaction we can get, and however we can serve our members, that's what we're all for. So I want to thank everybody again for this wonderful evening. I still got maybe 90 minutes or no, about 60 minutes left in tonight's football game. If you're following the NFL football and the kickoff between the Bills and the Rams. Otherwise, have a good evening, everybody. And thank you very much for your attendance. Bye-bye.